Welcome to the Whole Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you become a fat burner, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey everybody, it's Debbie Potts, and I'm doing a new episode of the Whole Athlete Podcast with the best triathlon coach around, Mr. Mark Allen. Hi, Mark.
How you doing?
Just in time for the new year. We're just recording this around the holiday season, end of the year, and I thought you would be the man to talk to about what triathletes should be doing this time of year, base training, if it even exists anymore. So talk about base training and let's kind of dive into what people should do in the wintertime and how you prefer to train people.
Well, the first thing is hopefully they've actually deconditioned a little bit from the racing season. You know, you build throughout the whole year, and then you usually have your big races in the late summer or fall or even late fall. And after that, there's a real need to let your fitness kind of dip, meaning you have to cut back on your training, definitely cut back on any intensity training that you're doing, and just let your fitness drop a little bit. And part of the reason is that over time, our bodies get very efficient at doing the same thing over and over and over. That's what the idea of training is. But after a while, your body stops responding from the training in terms of getting big gains in fitness. And so you can hit these plateaus because it's sort of like eating the same meal all the time. Might be your favorite meal for a week, but after a month, you need to change it up. And it's the same with training, not only physically, but then also just to let your mind kind of rest in the off season and not have it be so focused as it can be when you're in the middle of your year. So anyway, hopefully, here we are coming up on the winter solstice in about a week, actually. And hopefully you have let your fitness go a little bit. That doesn't mean that you sit on the couch. Stay active. It's important to keep your running up just because consistency anyway. It doesn't have to be long, doesn't have to be fast. But the main thing with running is that if you let it go for too long, when you come back, your cardiovascular fitness will come back quickly, but the integrity of your joints and tendons and ligaments, it takes them longer to readapt. And so that it can lead to injuries. So anyway, just doing, 30-minute runs a few days a week is enough to keep that activated, but definitely stay moving. And then when you're ready to start transitioning back into a kind of more structure, that most people kind of target right after the new year for that. One of the really interesting things about coming back and getting into shape is that you get tired quickly because you're out of shape. And when you get tired quickly, all of your biomechanics start to sort of fall apart, so maybe, even like for me, example, when I would start back into my season, even riding for an hour and a half would seem like forever. And I could feel my muscles kind of starting to shut down, even after an hour of riding. That's a great chance to work on keeping your biomechanics together, swimming, cycling, and running. So because when you're in a race, you will start to fatigue. And if you have practiced holding your biomechanics together during the early season in those times where you do fatigue in your training, then you can also do it in the races. When you get in better shape in the middle of the summer, in the middle of the season, you can go through a lot of workouts and never get to that point where your biomechanics start to fall apart because you are so fit and so strong. And so, that's one focus for people, to think about their stride length, think about their cadence when they're running, think about relaxing their shoulders and are their arms moving and effectively and just swinging. In the pool, work on your stroke mechanics, so especially as you start to fatigue at the end of a workout. And, cycling is probably the least biomechanical thing because you're never at a full range of motion and so much of your weight is carried by the bike itself. You're sitting on that seat. But still, you can practice, when your legs start to get tired, people tend to hold tighter onto the handlebars to get leverage, because their legs aren't doing it together, and their hips and their glutes are fatiguing. Work on that during the early season. But to talk directly to your point about base, and in my opinion, the early part of the year, January, February, March, is the prime time to lay that aerobic base, to develop that fat burning system within your body that enables you to access fat for fuel. Every time you go out and you train aerobically, you're stimulating your body to develop fat burning enzymes. And the more of those that you have, the more access per minute to fat molecules that are stored, that you can then release that energy so that you can go faster without having your heart rate skyrocket and go up and having it going anaerobic, and all of a sudden you're accessing carbohydrates and fat burning is turned off, and all of a sudden you've got this little bit of carbs in your body, about 2,000 calories. You've got so much fat, all of us, even lean people, that you could go a long way if you could get all of it to access.
And that's what I think about doing in the wintertime, is really take an opportunity to work on your form, technique in each sport. Especially for me, it's always swimming in the wintertime, but strength and what you're just saying, aerobic engine. And it seems like one idea when I wanted to have you come on the show to talk about this is that most people, aerobic engine is teaching your body burn fat, build that aerobic engine this time of year. But instead, what I hear more people doing are for cycling, especially because people ride, unless you're in California or somewhere, it's nice all year, but most people work out indoors on a bike on a trainer. And what type of workouts are they doing? I keep hearing the same story that a lot of people are doing the power wattage, FTP, and they're doing those high watts and doing spin class and, flywheel and soul cycle, that kind of stuff's popular in Seattle. But these triathlon groups are doing these indoor hard, high intensity interval training. And I was just curious, in your opinion, if that's, beneficial at strength, but they're also trying to get highest power output if they can, as with high heart rate. And some people have been injuring themselves because they're competitive type A athletes that go, and they're trying to get that high power. So kind of talk about your thoughts about that subject.
Well, there's definitely a time to do that, but it should be done after you've built that aerobic base. If you start your season doing really high intensity workouts, you'll get super fit really quickly. You'll feel like, oh man, after 3 or 4 weeks, the improvement is just massive. However, as you know, anaerobic work is high physiological stress on the body. It stresses the adrenal system, and too much of a good thing will completely burn you out. And so most people who start the season with that kind of as the core diet of their exercise, harder workouts, by the time they get 3 or 4 months down the road, they're getting tired. They are not able to replicate that same intensity. They might even start to lose lean muscle mass instead of continue to gain it. They'll plateau in terms of getting faster at any given heart rate. And then by the middle of the summer, when they should really be hitting their stride after a long base period building in the winter, and then fine tuning that with some speed work as you get close to the races, they're going to see everything is starting to go down, slide down the wrong side of the slope. And it's not as entertaining to just do steady aerobic work as it is to have this complicated interval workout that you're doing with hill sprints on the, on your bike trainer or whatever it is that you're doing inside. But, that's just a recipe for disaster in my mind. And I've seen it, when I was racing, probably, 9 out of 10 guys would start early in the year with just hard stuff, because when you're out of shape, everything can be hard, and boy, they would just be super fit by February, even into March. And I'd be way behind them because that was when I was building my aerobic base. I wasn't doing any speed work. And then when I started to add in my speed work, all of a sudden the tables turned, and I was continuing to build my fitness was getting stronger and stronger, and theirs had really plateaued already. So,
yeah.
Another thing to keep in mind too with training is that one of the reasons you train is to figure out how to manage sort of, I don't know if I want you to call it monotony, but monotony. You know, when you're in a race, there's no distraction. There's nothing to distract you from the experience, and you're in it. And if you're doing an Ironman, that can be a lot of hours where you're just in it, and you're going steady. You know, the only thing to break it up is an aid station, or, you know, maybe a little bit of terrain on the course. But when you do those steady aerobic workouts, you know, that's also training your mind to just be able to get in a groove and stay with it. And there's just no way to train yourself to do that unless you do those just long, steady type of workouts. And those give you fitness, and they train your mind.
Well, I was just writing down, I was talking to someone about this yesterday, that trying to get them not to train so high heart rate, especially this time of year. And this time, you know, people get off maybe through October if they do Ironman Hawaii, or if they're doing Florida or something like that. It's a late season race. And if they don't decondition a little bit, as you're saying earlier, that someone was telling me they always do well, and then they get themselves injured end of the season, and they didn't take over that off season, was never a word, and they just continue on and start the next season just not feeling great, and then continue on and ignore those red flags of adrenal fatigue and other overtraining, overreaching symptoms. But it's a lot of people in the wintertime don't know how to train lower heart rate because they want to do group events, and they don't want to be by themselves because they spent all this time, you know, maybe training on their own a lot in the summer and race season. But they want to do the groups. But what happens, you get all those people that are type A competitive people in a group. No one wants to do a low heart rate. They want to go hard or go home. I think that's a tough part, because you want to be social, but how do you do a group training workout without making a hammer fest?
Well,
pick new friends.
yeah. You know, just I've found anyway, if I just let people go in that early part of the year, you know, I could stay with them on, let's say I'm riding my bike, and I could stay with them on the flats. You can draft. But then when they wind up for the sprints, just let them go. Or if they want to be the king of the mountain and get to the top of the climb before you, hey, just let them go. You know, they'll wait for you. They'll wait 5 minutes, or they'll circle around for a couple minutes, or whatever it is. Yeah. And slowly you'll see that over time, that gap when they're going hard and you're still staying aerobic is going to get closer and closer and closer. And, you know, over the years, my training partners saw how that worked. And so then they sort of got on board with what I was doing. And so then all of a sudden, you know, the first year I trained, where I was really dividing my workouts into aerobic and anaerobic, you know, my training partners were just like light years ahead of me in the early season. But then over time, as my aerobic base built, and as they saw how beneficial that was to do that over the course of the year, then they got on board with that. And then all of a sudden we had these big, long group rides that were aerobic, that weren't hammer fests. And so it was very, very social. You know, you can do an occasional something crazy in the in the early season. You know, if you do one real intense session, a long session, something that's like a complete overreach for your fitness, that'll actually give you a quick bump up in your fitness. But just don't do it every week or every 2 weeks. You know, spread those sort of shock workouts or shock experiences. Like maybe you just go do a 10K, and you know you're not trained for it, so you just go, you blast it. You're not going to make a PR, but you'll get a real good fitness bump from that just one thing that you did. It's just doing it every day or a bunch of times every week in the early season. That's just, you know, again, in my opinion, a recipe for disaster down the road.
Yeah. So you have to see the light at the end of the tunnel almost, that it's like, all right, everyone can pass me now, but later on when it comes springtime, I'll be feeling so much stronger and moving faster than other people. Or like, I remember I was, you know, keeping my heart rate down, and then second half of the ride, everyone that was not paying attention to their heart rate was back of the pack or dropped off, and we said, see you at the car, because they couldn't keep up anymore. But I think that's what you have to be patient and just stick to your plan in the off season. And I think doing more strength training is really important time, because I never could do a lot of heavier weights in this summertime, because you always want to save your legs for your important workouts on the run and the bike. But do you have your clients do more strength training this time of year, or more weights, heavier stuff?
It's a real good time of year to do it. Technically strength training is anaerobic, but it doesn't seem, unless you're super, super sensitive to lactate, it doesn't seem to interrupt with your aerobic development. So it's a great time of year to do strength work. And the type of strength work that I did in the early part of the season was doing sets of between 12 and 15 reps with a weight that was challenging, but not so heavy that by the end I was at complete fatigue and exhaustion. I didn't go to failure. So I always wanted to choose a weight that was challenging, but where I knew that I had one or two more reps in me. And that seemed to keep it at a low enough impact on my aerobic system that it didn't interfere with my aerobic fat burning development. However, it gave me those real good strength gains. Later, when I was more fit and getting closer to the season, then I would do some shorter sets where I would go to failure. But that was for a very short period. And it's sort of kind of like how you do speed work. I don't think it's safe to do or advisable to do speed work 52 weeks out of the year. You have to dose it out at the right times of the year, let your body absorb the benefit of it, hit your key races at the end of that period with your anaerobic work before you start that downward slide of getting overtrained. And it's the same with the strength training. Some people like to do strength work where they're doing 20, 30 reps of whatever. That's like kind of a circuit training thing. That's not true strength work. You're not lifting a heavy enough weight if you're doing 30 reps to give you the real strength gains that you want to get out of strength training. Great time to work on developing that core, developing balance, so that you can get on and off your foot real quickly when you're running, things like that. It's a great time of year to do that type of work.
Well, I really believe in, especially each year, getting tighter in my hips. I need more mobility, hip mobility, and stability standing on one foot, like on a foam pad and balance boards and stuff like that. I think it's good to include as well as the strength work. So I find my hips are tight. So this is a good time of year to be able to really work on my movement of my hips and getting those glutes engaged and releasing my overly worked internal rotators and hip flexors that just need opening up. So just adding that into routine, I think, is important as well as doing weights that get fatiguing towards the end of the set. And mixing it up. That as so many people, I watch them work out when I go lift weights at my gym, and not my studio that I own. I like to go work out at my other club and just be a member and not feel like I'm working. But I can't, people's form that's my big thing, is form and alignment when I'm working out, when I train people, why people come to our studio, because I want to see them do it right. And so many people just, go through the motions and don't really mentally connect to their body and be present. They're thinking of what's coming up next, or what's their day going to be like. But I think when you're exercising as you're on the bike or the run, but strength training, apply that same mind-body connection. So you're engaging your stabilizers, you feel your back working. You're not doing everything with your arms and your shoulders, that you're getting your back muscles or your chest or your core. So many people just do everything. They don't even feel the right muscles. So that'd be my tip to contribute, is that what is this exercise for? What's the purpose? Let's focus on how we can stabilize everything else and engage the right muscles that you're trying to work, because it's a disaster in that area as well if you don't.
Yeah, and that applies to your swimming, cycling, and running too. Like I said, in the early season, it's really a prime time to work on your mechanics and your form. And there should be a part of your brain that's always focused on how you're moving as opposed to how hard you're going. And that was just sort of second nature, because I started out in sports as a swimmer, and as a swimmer, you're always working on your stroke. If you're ever in a ever in a workout and you reach a point where you're going so hard you are not focusing on your stroke, then your stroke falls apart, and then you lose efficiency. And so that just became how I tried to be aware of my movement on the bike, be aware of my movement as I was running. Look at videos of people, in single sport people that you think look like they have great form, and see how they move and try to figure out the difference between how they're moving and how you move, and then ultimately try to feel like you're moving like that single sport person is, who's really good at their individual sport. I used to do that with runners. I would look at video of runners who I just thought had this amazing form, and then when I was out running, it was very easy to kind of visualize how they were moving and how I was not compared to them. And so I just tried to kind of align those two things so that the way I felt was the way in my mind I saw them moving. And that's just a great simple way to kind of be aware of how you're moving. It gives you efficiency that you'll never get otherwise. And like you said, if something's tight, all of a sudden you'll be aware of it because you see, oh yeah, I'm not moving the same way that person is.
Well, I find that really common for most athletes or any person I train, but especially triathletes. If you're working all day, they're working rounded over position and they're cycling and they're running the front of the body. You got to work some other planes of motion, and working on mobility I think is huge, so you can run properly and bike, as you're saying, and swimming. But getting a stability ball, doing some range of motion, doing some tubing exercises, going to yoga, doing some Pilates. I think people need to learn how to move better, and getting lateral motions and rotational and extension, I think, is so huge. And people can't do an inchworm on the floor, a bear crawl. And in fitness, we call it GTS, ground to standing. That, I find a lot of people that they bike and run and do racing that they can't get up off the ground very well because their hips are so tight. So just because you can be a super strong triathlete, I think it's even more important. Can you move properly? Can you get up off the floor without having a difficulty standing up? But
yeah, and it all comes down to range of motion. If you have free movement and range of motion, so if you're at full stride and you're not fighting your body to get to full stride, let's say when you're running, then you're just more efficient than if you're having to actually pull against your body to open up that stride. And the same with the swim stroke. Some people naturally have this super flexible shoulder stuff, and so they hop in the pool after not being in the water for 10 years, they're still going to go fast. The less natural swimmers, yeah, you have to work on that shoulder flexibility, work on the feel of the water, do stroke drills to just get that. And I'm all for free time, and free time comes with better mechanics.
Yeah. So swimming masters is another question. A lot of, swimming, summertime, people might go in the lake. You have workouts, like I know we'd have 1,000-meter interval and 500s and stuff. And masters swim workout, I know the people I swim with, they're not triathletes. Half the swimming pool is, masters or collegiate athletes are swimmers that are in our masters now. And so, they're used to 50 meters and 100 meters, and everything is shorter distance, but it's not a lot of drills, and it seems like it's more speed work and higher intensity, and they're working group, and it's just always hard workouts. So swimming for triathletes off season, if they do a masters, what are some suggestions what they should do instead of going high intensity?
Well, it's, with masters, the good thing is that, there's lanes with different intervals for the same set. And so, like what I would do is I would just throw myself in one of the easier lanes when I was in the base building part of my year, so that I could actually control the intensity of my swim and still make the interval. And then as my fitness started to come around, then I would be able to move over into a little faster lane with a faster interval and still stay aerobic, and then eventually be, with the big guns as I moved closer to the season. So, masters is a great way to improve your swimming. One, it is a group feel. You're not out there slogging away on your own. You have a coach who can periodically say, hey, your elbow is too low or high, or you're crossing over with your arm or whatever it is. And because of the varied abilities of the swimmers, there are lanes with probably an interval that you can hit that will enable you to stay at the intensity that you want to be at, as opposed to a much higher intensity than you want to be in the base building period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think going to slower send-off time and be with us slower people. And then going back to cycling, this question that Robert and I were talking about the other day is that people doing these power classes or cycling, we've talked to this over the years in many podcasts, but power meters versus heart rate. A lot of those coaches are just doing power. And I would suggest to people I've talked to use a heart rate monitor and do your power. So would you be coaching people this year doing the max aerobic function, the 180 minus the age for all their workouts, and use your power meter, but keep it by heart rate, combination of the two for cycling?
Yeah, the combination is what's golden. You know, if you set your training zones based on your heart rate, you can watch how your power changes at those heart rates over time. And that's what's going to show you whether you're getting more fit or not. So, you know, if you just have a heart rate, just a power meter, and let's say you're riding at what feels like the right pace at 200 watts this month, and then next month in those same workouts you're riding 250 watts, you don't have anything to gauge it against, so you don't know if you are more fit or you're just going harder.
Yes.
If you're measuring that power output against a heart rate, you're going to know whether you're more fit or not, because maybe you're pushing 200 watts at 140 beats a minute this month, and the next month at 140 beats a minute it's 250 watts. That's the clear indicator that you are getting more fit. You're going faster at the same heart rate, and that's ultimately what you're trying to do. And you know, running, you're gauging your pace against heart rate. So this month maybe you're running an 8.5 minute mile at 140. Next month it's 7:45 at the same heart rate. That's showing you pure fitness gains. If you don't have that heart rate to gauge it against, again, you won't know if you necessarily are more fit or if you're just going harder than you did previously.
And then in the swimming pool, what do you have people to pace themselves that way? Because most people don't wear the heart rate monitor, and they can have their time for the send-offs, or how do you evaluate that?
You know, when we would do intervals, we'd come into the wall and you have your rest period, and I would always just get my heart rate when I came into the wall, measure it for 6 seconds with, you know, the right here in your neck, multiply it by 10, and that's your beats per minute. And it takes 6 seconds each time you come in to figure out where you're at. And then within each workout, you start to kind of get a feel for where you're at with the way you feel as you're swimming. So a lot of times you would know you're aerobic, let's say, on a set, especially if you're not really pushing it. And then as I started to maybe go in one of the faster sets with shorter intervals and shorter swims, then I'd check just to make sure I wasn't going berserk with my effort. Mm-hmm. Very simple.
Yes, I like that. So the last question kind of sums up everything that you've been talking a little bit about burning fat in the off season. Is your metabolic efficiency. We want to be fat burning machines for aerobic endurance sports. Endurance is aerobic, and we should be burning fat for fuel. But what would your description be for what we need to do to become fat burning machines in the winter season?
Well, the main thing is doing aerobic workouts. That is what stimulates your body to develop that fat burning system.
That's by heart rate, 180 minus your age, or what are you referring to?
Yeah, basically 180 minus your age. If you've had some years of fitness, of training, you can add 5 beats to whatever that number is. If you're over about 55 or 60, you can add an additional 5 beats to that. If you're under about 25, you can add an additional 5 beats to whatever you have at that point. So it varies based on your fitness, but that's a general guideline, yes, of figuring out where the maximum heart rate is that you're going to be able to stay aerobic at. And when I say stay aerobic, I'm meaning at your maximum aerobic heart rate, you're getting about half your energy from fat and half your energy from carbohydrate. And then when you go higher than that, all of a sudden you switch the scales and you're getting more of your energy from carbohydrates than fat. And eventually, you know, you start to go higher, then fat burning really gets turned off, and it's just a huge amount from carbohydrate. the key about that is that when you're at that max aerobic heart rate where you're getting 50-50 fat and carbohydrate energy, it's still low stress physiologically. You're not getting a real activation of the adrenal system. When you go above that, then you start to really pull energy from the adrenal system. And so it suddenly becomes high physiological stress. So even though you might be only going 3 or 4 beats higher, all of a sudden there's this big shift in your body, and you go from low stress to high stress. And it goes back to fight or flight. When the lion was chasing us looking like we were a good lunch, you didn't want to feel low stress. You wanted to be in high stress. You wanted to activate that anaerobic physiology that got you that high octane carbohydrate to be the source of fuel so you could run fast and get out of the way and save your life. And that's sort of what's happening in training. Base training at or below that max aerobic heart rate is low physiological stress. You can recover from it basically day to day. When you do training that's above that heart rate, it's high physiological stress. It activates the adrenal system. Recovery can take 2 days, 3 days to finally really get you back to ground zero. So, that's sort of the nutshell version of that.
Yeah. Well, I just want to summarize that because I think that's an important part of what we talk about, deconditioning in the off season and building that base. But I know a lot of people are like, well, what is base training? And I never do that. I never take time to recover. They just go into their next cycle because we get used to just swim, bike, run 3-4 times of each every week. And that's just how we operate. And we get to be trained that way, and that we don't know what else to do with their time. That's what we do at lunchtime. I go to masters. And I think we forget that there's other things to do, and adding in yoga or Pilates. They have all these reformer classes and doing more strength training. I think it is good to mix it up and take a couple months of variety, and then, when the weather gets better, you start training, or depending on when your race season begins. And I don't know if people do it 12 months a year. Myself, I have always taken a month off of just not getting on my bike and going outside, and it's easier in Seattle when we do have a little rainier season. And I think in California or Florida, when you have warmer weather most of the year, that you have to make yourself, or I have clients in Texas that, the weather's pretty good, that you'll still ride. And so anyways, I think a lot of people don't know how to take a break because we're that stereotype triathlete.
I tell people in the off season, if you're going out and you feel like you're training or you're focusing on getting more fit, you're not exercising it in the way that an off season should be designed around. It should be designed around going outside and running, biking, swimming, because you just want to be out there and enjoy.
It's fun.
Enjoy that sunshine in the middle of winter or whatever it is, or to just be out in nature. And if the focus is I just want to move and be out because it feels good, then you're likely not going to overdo it. But if you're trying to get a jump start and a head start on next season by taking, a week easy, and then all of a sudden you're back into your full swing, you will likely pay the price somewhere in the middle of the year when you're actually trying to hit your peaks.
You have to write that on the fridge or bulletin board somewhere so you read that. Remember why I'm doing this. Yeah. So that kind of, to wrap it up, the happiness is what I've talked about this last few episodes, and gratitude, because it's the season. I think we need to reflect on the past year and look at the positive things and what you're grateful for. And I think what we brought your name up doing the Fit Body, Fit Soul is that, like you said, be happy and do things that you love to do. So what are some 3 things that you suggest people doing this time of year to make themselves that have more gratitude and happiness and positive energy?
Well, one thing I do, every day I try to take a few times throughout the day and just be quiet and just have that sense that, life is good just the way it is. I have problems, I have difficulties, I got challenges, there's things I have to deal with that I don't want to. But look around, and so just take those moments and feel that just deep inside happiness, and to also in the winter, I studied with Brant Secunda shaman in the Huichol tradition. He really emphasizes that it's good to reflect the season. So, all the plants have gone inside, the trees lose their leaves, everything goes inward, and that's what we should be doing also. So take this off-season time and reflect. Hopefully, you're far enough away from your racing season that you had last year, and next year is far enough off that you can be objective about what's important and what you want to do in the coming year. If you're trying to plan 2018 the day after you finish your last race, you're still emotionally attached to that whole season. And so whether it was a good year or a bad year, you're attached to it. And so this is a great time because you're kind of in that interim, and to just think, okay, what's important? What do I want to do next year? What will bring me happiness? What pursuit or dream do I want to go for, knowing that maybe I won't reach it, but the pursuit is worth it. And then, get clear on that now, because this is the time to do that. Spend time with family and friends. It's a golden opportunity without training being as focused as it can be during the year, during the summertime, to spend more time with the people who support you and make it possible for you to go out there and to live this lifestyle and these dreams, and sort of put some energy back into that friendship bank.
That's great. And people can sign up for their next workshops in Santa Cruz for you, Brant.
Our next Fit Soul, Fit Body workshop is it's in May. It's May 4th through 6th, and it's at a new retreat center called 1440 and it's just an amazing facility that they put together just a few miles inland from where I live here in Santa Cruz. And that will be a great 3-day workshop, learning a lot of tools that can help you with, getting rid of negative thoughts and adopting a more positive attitude, learning how to quiet your mind, but then also I'll be speaking a lot about exactly what we've talked about today with aerobic and anaerobic training, and talking about nutrition, and just putting the whole ball of wax together for who we are as people. So whether you're trying to lose weight or feel just healthier, go win an Ironman, develop your inner character, your inner spiritual being a little more, there's something for everybody in this workshop. 1440.org is where the workshop is listed.
Okay.
And then my coaching, markallencoaching.com. It's a great time we have off-season maintenance programs that are really good for giving people scaled back versions of what you would get in the racing season, with just enough sporadic, faster stuff, not too high intensity, to just keep it interesting. And then, of course, if you have races that are coming up starting in March or April, we have our racing programs and their peak performance racing programs.
Perfect. And people can sign up for the whole year. Do you still offer year-long?
Yeah, we have 3 different kinds of memberships: monthly, 6-month, and yearly. And so there's different price points, and we love working with people.
Great. Well, I have interest in it myself again, trying to make sure next year I can do something, a race, not hopefully someday go as fast as it was, but I know this training has always worked for me. So thanks for coming on the show and giving us some tips on how we can train in the off season and be smart in how we train as well. So happy holidays and happy New Year to you, and see you in the new year sometime.
All right. Happy holidays to you, and happy holidays, everybody. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you the next time.
Thanks for listening to the Whole Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at wholeathletepodcast.com. You can help us continue and grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and see you next time.